sie einfach in den Arm und sage ihr mit meinem Charme. Rosamunde, schenk mir dein Herz und sag ja.
Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen. We got a big guest today. This is someone we've all spoken about. All the guys who were born in the 70s, born in the early 80s. We've talked about him for many reasons. Those of us who had the opportunity to share a field with him and some old timers games, to be ref by him, we all know what a class act this guy is. But again, for those of you who don't know this guest, because I'm not going to mention his name yet, as I normally don't. A lot of you younger kids know him as a tall, thin guy dressed in black with a whistle in his hand during your playing days. And that's not downplaying the role of a referee, but he was more than just one spoke on a wheel that is Windsor soccer. For the generation before me, he was a vital cog in the Teutonia engine of producing great teams and great players. He was also a big pillar in the German Swabia community as well. The reality is that he is much more than you know. When I was 16 years old, I played for Teutonia after my SC Nationals team had folded, and I picked up a program in the Teutonia club. And those of you who know me know that I love my nostalgia. And I looked through all the stories of the past, I looked through all the pictures, and lo and behold, they were the same pictures that this guest was kind enough to bring to me today, and they are absolutely terrific. The stories are amazing, and the history behind this gentleman and Teutonia Club is first class. He was there as a player, manager, coach, administrator, groundskeeper, and a referee. I don't think there's too many people that'll follow those descriptions in any club in this city. So we must never forget about Teutonia Club, and we will never forget about what Frank Mora has done for the city in the soccer sense, on a human level, and on an administrative level as well. So on behalf of all of the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, and the 30-year-olds, Frank, God damn it, welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being here. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I had emailed out our faithful viewers and listeners, and one of the things that they asked me to get Frank to do was a bit of an acid test, just to see how true and green of a Teutonia player he is and was. And I was asked to put 3 beers in front of him. One out of the 3 beers is an Austrian beer. And so during the course of this podcast, Frank's going to be sipping on these cups, and we're basically going to understand how big of a connoisseur he is in the wide world of Teutonic beers. So I'm dying to hear the results to see how well you do, and then to that person, we are going to publish the results afterwards. So
I might be under the table by the time this podcast starts.
That's the idea. That's the only way I get people to really let loose on the podcast. So before I start asking you the big questions that we all have about you, Frank, I'm fascinated with German soccer. I'm fascinated by the way they approach the game, both culturally and administratively. I know quite a bit about the Argentinian game. We think we all know a little bit about the British game, but I think until you're in those doors yourself, we're kind of guessing. But the German approach to the game is quite often an enigma towards many of us. So I've got 2 statements here that describe the German thought and the German identity of soccer, and I want to know which ones that you think ring most true. So the first one's in German. We'll give an English translation afterwards. First one says, Das Runde muss ins Eckige. And that basically means the round thing has to go into the rectangle. The second one is, Football is a simple game. 22 men chase the ball for 90 minutes, and at the very end, the referee blows a whistle, and Germany wins again. And that quote was by Gary Lineker, the famous English striker. Explain that to us. Which one rings more? Is it a simplistic view, or is this...
I think the second one holds more true. The big part is the technique and also the discipline. And obviously, the ball runs much faster than a player carrying the ball.
Right.
So nowadays, like soccer, the opportunity might be there only for a couple seconds. And if the ball is not delivered on time, you miss your opportunity to take advantage of or execute.
Sure.
So to me, I think with German, the part is also they're very physically fit, obviously have good skill, have good knowledge of the system that they're going to play, and everybody's got to be on the same page.
Sure. Very well said. And I could see that. I could see that not just from the outsider point of view. Anytime I watch Germany, and I have to be honest, when Germany's playing in the World Cup, if I have time, I watch them. They're not a team that always bedazzles me, but they're a team that strikes fear into me if Argentina's playing them, and we all know what happens the last 3 times Germany played Argentina. And they strike fear in me for that reason, exactly what you just said. They play the same way if they're 4-0 up or 4-0 down, and you can just never count them out. And they're going to attack and defend in the same way, and it is such a mechanical feature for that team. I think it's a credit to them. When people mention Brazil as the owners of soccer's, qualitative crowns in terms of 5 World Cups and producing all these wonderful players, I always feel that Germany gets the shaft because, it's not easy to win 4 World Cups. And the amount of finals that they've been in alone is incredible.
Well, the whole idea is because of their style of play and so on, they have actually had a lot of opportunities to actually win more cups.
Right.
But like earlier said, on your first segment, you cannot force play.
Right.
If the play isn't there, you cannot force the play. So you have to be patient and just go about the workman's way.
The workman's way, I like that. So, Frank, give us your birthplace and your date of birth, please, for everybody.
I was born in April 20th, 1946, in the former Yugoslavia, and in Zemun, which is just on the other side of the river Danube from Belgrade.
Right. So with that being said, Frank, your first language growing up, were you brought up in a Serbian language, or were you brought up in a German language? I was born in 1946. That's at the end of the war, right.
Second World War. And the communists took over, and anyone that was German definitely did not speak German. And my parents, they never spoke with us kids German, although amongst them,
right,
they did communicate.
Wow.
Because before the World War, there was in our area was a German community, and it was called in a suburb of Zemun, and was called Franzstal. And there they had their own government, German government, schools, and language.
Wow.
And there were also successful business people and so on. And so after the war, when the Germans, lost or were considered, enemies of the state,
right,
then a lot of people also, even from my relatives, before the end of the war in 45, they left everything behind just to make sure with their families to Salzburg, Austria, and other parts, just to avoid persecution.
That's incredible. So, I mean, obviously, right after World War II, we're talking about a lot of terrible emotions, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment towards not just the Germans, but everybody, really, who's involved in World War II. Everybody had their own beef with whatever country with which they struggled or with which they went to war. In your situation, you kind of carried two hats, ethnically speaking, right? Like you said, you were born in the former Yugoslavia. You had Tito's partisan political party in play, trying to eradicate any kind of signs of Nazism or the Ustasas that were around in Croatia at the time as well. When you're traveling to Salzburg, when you're traveling anywhere outside of your area, how did you ethnically identify yourselves as a family?
Well, initially growing up and as being very young and attending the Serbian schools, and so on, we weren't aware of the problems as kids and so on. Mm-hmm. It's the parents and so on. They're the ones that actually knew what was happening, but they weren't sharing this information. We were too young to be involved.
Okay.
Later, like in 1957, my aunt from Canada, my dad's sister, they sponsored us to come eventually to Canada. And then in 1957, we had to cancel our Yugoslavian citizenship. And then we moved to Germany and we settled in Bremen, in northern Germany. And we were there for practically 3 years. And there we received German citizenship, and then we were German. There I had to learn another language, German. And then similarly coming to Canada,
all right,
had to learn another language, English.
That's incredible. You come to Canada and you're obviously you're built off of German citizenship. You're born in the former Yugoslavia. Your first language is Serbo-Croatian. When you meet your first Canadian pal and he asks you, so as Canadian kids do, what are you? That instead of what's your identity, what's your ethnicity, how did you identify?
Well, for myself, we identified ourselves as Germans.
Sure.
German descendants, okay?
Right.
And the part is, like coming to Canada, being back home, like where we lived, I never knew about the Serbian and Croatian problems,
Right.
until I got to Windsor. And then on the soccer field, it was like almost like a war.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the part is, all in stride. As kids, we really never got into the politics and so on. And being afterwards, growing up in the Daytonia organization and the community, then we spoke German,
Sure.
I spoke both languages. Actually, I spoke all three languages eventually.
Right.
I spoke Yugoslavian, German, and I tried English.
Sure. Yeah, you tried English, right? So you're in Canada. I mean, you leave back all the history in Europe. You're leaving family. Like you're just saying, you had family here too, which is obviously a blessing. But you're coming to this new world. Are you filled with anxiety? Are you excited at this point? What do you remember the sensations when you were that young?
Well, I only remember my mom. Like my dad worked on the Danube. Mm-hmm. They had their own 13-meter boat, and they were pulling barges and I'm not sure. I guess it's a barge also, where wagons, farmer produce and stuff, they're moving from one shore to the other one, you know. And my dad was still skeptical about leaving. And my mom said, I'm grabbing the kids and we're going. You want to stay here? You stay. And that was the end of discussion.
Oh, I love that. So your mom and your dad, our discussions that we had prior to starting the podcast, they seem like hardworking individuals, family first, like many Europeans, like many people at that time in general.
Like basically, when we came to Canada, you know, my mom was actually the treasurer, the banker, and everybody, like whoever worked, if there was income coming in, they went into the central committee.
The central committee.
Central bank, you know, and we were able to build a house, you know.
Sure.
And we had help, you know, because we had our uncles, and aunts, and everybody.
Sure.
They were involved in construction business and so on. So it was a little bit easier, you know.
Sure, absolutely. Now,
But,
and the German community here was sizable.
yes, after the war, like the German community actually, the German community actually started in the late 20s. And in 1929, this is actually when soccer in Windsor, the German Society Soccer, actually started in 1929. And there were a couple players that were of German descent playing for other clubs, and then they started the German team. And then in 1935, they formed, and they asked for the Ontario government for the German charter in 1935, so they received that. So then, and things were pretty tough during the Depression, you know.
Sure.
And everybody continued, and then post Second World War, more immigration came in, and that's when German society grew. And actually, the first place, Detonia Club, under Detonia name, in 1936, they bought a house, and it was on 1119 Langlois. That was the Detonia Club.
Really?
And then, as the immigration grew and the people, it was obviously too small.
Sure.
And then they bought the property on 55 Edinburgh. And in 1954 to 58, they actually built a club. And being successful, in 1966, they doubled the size of the club.
Incredible.
And we ended up with almost 3,000 members.
3,000 members. Majority of them, were they from Swabia? Were they?
Well, actually, they were from Europe, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and so on.
Right.
And one of the reasons in the 1930s, early parts, I guess, with the Hitler stuff going on in Europe, I guess it was more on a political side,
Sure.
where the Germans were sort of viewed more or scrutinized more.
Sure.
So they decided in 1935 to change to Detonia, which was a mountain range, and it would encompass all these
The Germanic speaking.
Germanic peoples in these lands.
Okay.
And then later on, my understanding was, reading the background history, that then they were also open to other people joining the German,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
So the membership grew up to 3,000 people.
Wow. What was it? I mean, you weren't around during those times right after war, obviously, but from tales from other Teutonia members at that time, post World War II, Did they face a lot of stigmatization, discrimination from Canadians at that time, or does that?
Just a little bit,
Yeah.
you know, because of the influence what was happening in Europe, and whatever the Canadian Secret Service was, you know, they were sort of overseeing, you know, those people too.
Really?
Like example, Kitchener in the early days was known as Berlin,
That's incredible.
you know, and then
Yeah.
the name was eventually changed
Right.
because of political
Sure.
reasons and circumstances.
Right. It's still one of the biggest Oktoberfests in North America. Am I right? In Kitchener?
Kitchener, yes.
That's incredible.
We had it in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
We were up to 5,000 people.
5,000 people.
And there was the halls, all halls, there were 4 halls,
Right.
and the big tent. And I remember we would hire for security Windsor police, and as people came over the fence, that's exactly how they left. They were tossed back over the fence.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's surprising, A, that, you know, there was that kind of attendance at the Oktoberfest here in Windsor, which is phenomenal. B, you can remember that Oktoberfest.
Oh, the soccer group, we were responsible for dishing out draft beer
Okay.
in the tent. That was our.
That was it?
That was our.
So the Geyer brothers, they're Swiss?
No,
Or
they
they're Austrian?
they came from Austria, but
Okay.
a lot of them were born in the old country, the former Yugoslavia.
Oh,
But
okay.
a lot of them had escaped to during the war and post-war
Right.
to Austria, and from there they emigrated. Like I have from my relatives, aunts and uncles, a lot of them actually settled in Windsor, Detroit area. A lot of Germans from our ethnic community actually were in these 2 destinations. So
Incredible.
for the parents, it wasn't like, you know, unfamiliar.
Sure.
They were actually amongst friends,
Wow.
or they knew the people.
Is that right, eh? Oh, I think it's amazing. Every time I think of Teutonia Club, the first thing I think of is the field. Whether that's, you know, being an ex-soccer player or whatever, I just think of how immaculate that field was kept. It was a perfect atmosphere because you had one side that was kind of treed off, and then you had the trees kind of, you know, stopping the balls from going anywhere past that. But on the other side, you would get everybody who was coming out from the members bar for a you know, fresh breath of air, and they would just sit and watch the games. And
Actually, before from 54, 58, the initial property did not include the soccer field.
oh, really?
So the soccer field was actually on the opposite side where the tower is.
Oh, yeah.
The soccer field used to be there.
Oh,
And then
okay.
when the club got enlarged, one business person, Stiller's Menswear, he bought the land. I think he paid $15,000 at the time, and he donated it to the club.
What?
Then the soccer field was moved there, and then when the Oktoberfest started, the opposite side was just parking and everything else.
That's incredible. I think that's amazing. So, I mean, you go from, you said, a membership of around 3,000 people to somewhat of a sad ending. Even though it's revitalized, right? It's within the Fogelar Furland at the
Yeah.
moment, right? Is it just because membership was that people were less interested in their
What
culture?
it was involved is the Germans, for whatever reason, they were able to melt more into the community, and their kids did not, like when you have from the Croatian
Right.
and Italian families, the kids, they more or less, you know, followed the parents and they supported.
Sure.
Well, in the German society, the German young kids, they married off into other nationalities, and they never sort of came back to support the club.
Really?
Eventually, all these older people eventually ended up in retirement homes and so on, so that the membership at the end was maybe more like 200.
Oh,
And
God.
there were a lot of overhead expenses, and the last 4 years I was on the board, and the president actually asked us to stay on until we were able to sell off the club, the restitute of the club.
Wow.
And then Vogelfröhlen was kind enough, because they were also struggling with their downturn in membership and so on.
Sure.
And they invited us if we would like to join them. And we didn't have to become members of the Vogelfröhlen club, but we could use their facilities.
Wow.
And as banquets were made or whatever it is,
Yeah.
we would pay them, rental fees, and also attend the bar and so on. Spend some money. Although you're looking at the average age probably of the whole membership was between 75, 80 years old.
Is that right?
I was considered a youngster, and I'm 74.
So what would you say? I mean, you take the average Windsor kid, and when I say kid, I'm talking, of course, it's 16 to, I'll say 30, because even when I see 30-year-olds, I still think they're young.
They are.
Yeah, exactly. The 16 and 30-year-olds, they have a German last name. Maybe you don't have a German last name, but you have that in you. Why? What do you think stops kids from really wanting to take a deep dive into their culture and embrace it?
Things of the past where you brought your culture with you, and your politics and everything else, whatever you wanted to say, from the old country. Maybe there was another generation that sort of was fed into that. But I think after that, the kids became more Canadianized, diverse, and different mentality of thinking, and the ethnicity is not that critical. Certain ethnic groups,
Yeah.
they still are representative of their culture,
Right.
but a lot of younger kids, like in the olden country, let's say Serbs and Croatians were enemies. Well, kids go to school nowadays, play soccer together, and so on, and there's no animosity or even
Right.
the political side of it.
Right.
At least that's
Which is wonderful.
that's what I see from my angle growing up here.
Yeah. No, I would agree to that. I'm not sure if you agree to this, but I always find if you are a minority in a nation like Canada, we consider ourselves multicultural. But if you are in a smaller minority, and we'll take Serbs as an example here. If you look at the spectrum, and you see somebody with an English last name, it's fairly common in Canada. And it kind of, if anything, for a lot of Canadian kids that are like, third generation Canadians, and, they don't really know, they couldn't tell you if their great grandparents came from Liverpool or Manchester. The dilution for me starts with large ethnic pools. So you take the English, the Irish, the Scots, and a lot of people know that, okay, my last name is McPherson, maybe it's got to be Scottish, but that's it stops. But if you take the smaller minorities and you go all the way from Latin America, you comb Africa, you work your way up through Europe and Asia, I don't think that's ever going to be lost. Like you said, the parents drill it into their kid's head. Hey, you're Canadian, but your roots stem from here. Let's talk about those roots. And then you become proud to have them again. Which amazes me, because when I was reading German history and I was studying the language, I thought, I thought the Germans had remarkable history behind them, and so many times people go to the terrible 6 years that was World War II, and they base it on that. But German history is one of the richest, in Central and Northern Europe. I mean, that's why it mystifies me when you see a great last name like Schweinsteiger. If somebody were to have that here, you think right away, oh, I got to know what that means right away. You got Schweiny. That's right, Piggy. But I mean, yeah. So I would agree with you there. It's,
in our area, and you see the strength of the ethnic communities, and Croatians have a very strong, and you see, and that's one of the reasons why they're successful.
Yes.
In the latter years, Croatian soccer, they have minor soccer, communities are involved, a lot of volunteers, and so on. And you may have that in the Serbs too, and so on. But then, you would say, I don't know about Italians, would be the next group.
Yeah.
And that's it. I think after that, there is no strength in the or diversification.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why, like I said, was Germans being able to melt into Canadian society, and so that was the big downfall. Hopefully, last year, Daytonia had their 90-year soccer anniversary, and we do have it over 45 teams still active.
Really?
And Chris Geyer is running it. Maybe we can push it to a century mark, but I guess through research and so on, that we're actually one of the oldest organization in all of Ontario.
That's incredible. That is incredible. I have no. I mean, hey, I'll use the pronoun we, because now I'm determined to see if there's any ways that I can help as a former Teutonia alumnus for that 1 year. But I thought it was the greatest thing. I still think one of the greatest things about being a Canadian is when you do choose a sport like soccer, there's pride in your crest. And whether you're playing for Croatia, Serbs, Polonia, Teutonia, there's something about it. There's something special that when you're pulling on that jersey, you're not just representing 18 guys and a coach and a manager. You're kind of representing a people, through their immigration route to Canada and their hopes and dreams, and it's special. I hope there's a resurgence in that, and I hope that more kids kind of start to see it.
I think since time is changing, it's going in the opposite direction.
I know what you're saying, but I hope in 10 years' time I do see more Germany kits when I look at the youth levels of soccer. There's no question. But
even a lot of kids have moved on from Windsor, living like my kids. The two girls and my son, they live in Toronto.
They do.
Like the reason is there is no work for young people at the time, and for them, they have to move on, to other areas where the job market is.
Yeah.
And that has happened a lot in the 70s and 80s in Windsor.
Right.
So that was another outflow of young people.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can say it seems to be a trend that's happening even in Europe these days too. A lot of smaller towns, the population is decimated because there's jobs in a bigger city and things like that. So hopefully we can start a downward trend on that. So I want to segue this next portion of the podcast about you as a player, because how can I say this? When people saw Tony Teasel as a referee, the first thing that you noticed was his body shape, built like a cannonball with tree trunk legs. And the first thing that the guys my age would ask, like, hey, I heard that guy. I heard he was amazing. I heard he had a cannon. I heard so many amazing things about this guy, and you could tell by the way he walked. You could tell like every time he walked on the pitch, he looked like he owned it. He had that kind of swagger about him. And
You're talking about the center circle?
yeah, there's a bald spot right in the middle of the pitch for 90 minutes. Yeah, no, but and it would prompt you in your curiosity to ask questions. Who did he play for? What's his background? Where did he come from? And all that. And this is why I think it's important to have you on the show, is because it's not just the fact that you're giving back as a referee or an official or anything else, but I think a lot of people, a lot of guys my age, they don't know your history. And I was told before that you were a very good player, but then I got a quote today from somebody, and I'll tell you who it is afterwards, or if you want to guess it, feel free to guess it. This person sent in this statement here. Frank, as a player, I think he was not only one of the most skillful players I've ever played against, but also the most fair-minded and played with a lot of class. What do you think about that quote?
Vancho?
No, not Vancho. Although Vancho mirrored that with his comments when him and I were speaking to you. It's quite the compliment.
Yeah, man. I gotta buy this guy a beer. I don't know.
Eddie Dixon.
Eddie Dixon. Okay.
So
Yeah, he came through the ranks. He was. We're about probably 15 years difference.
It's 15 years difference.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. I mean, my Uncle Eddie used to tell me a lot about players, and it's hard for guys like myself, Frank, to understand really the golden era that was Windsor soccer. And I heard stories. I mean, Dave Jazz's dad, Aurelio Jazz. We heard he was a phenomenal player as well.
He was later in the 70s.
Yes.
Upper, like my era, my strength. Like I started in 1962 at the end of the year, soccer season, and my brother was playing for the Detonia B team, and he asked me for whatever, because there was no minor soccer at the time, and there was only A and B teams. They're all just men, right?
Right.
So I came to the practice, and so give and go, and I was up front, took a shot, and there was Bela Ferenci. He's Hungarian. He's a butcher by trade, and sometimes he practices his skills the same way. But anyway, he hit me in the sole of my foot, and I looked up and said, stay away from this guy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the practice, we went downstairs, and there were two dressing rooms for both teams. And Mr. Bender, the old gentleman, was the hat.
Sure.
And whoever practiced, he would dish out a beer. That was like part of the practice
Your
meal,
reward?
I guess. Anyway, but the B team coach was Connie Grumeza, and he approached me and he says, I'd like to sign you up for the B team, but against weak teams, I'll dress you and play you 15 minutes. And that was okay. I said, okay. And then in 63 was a regular, 64, regular in the 8 team. And that was the last year that we played in the Mission Ontario League.
Right.
And then from 65, and Detonia was in 64, we lost the Ontario Cup final to Sudbury. And then Sudbury and us, we were invited to join the National Soccer League, which was a semi-pro league, primarily a Toronto league.
Right.
And so ended up playing eventually semi-pro, and ended up winning 66, 67 out of the 4 years. We won the playoff championship.
Wow.
And I think both years we beat Hamilton Primos.
Yeah.
And they were actually in the North Canadian Soccer League. There was a pro league, Montreal, Hamilton, and 2 teams from Toronto.
Right.
But anyway, so we had some success there. So a lot of players that I've played with in the 60s, and Tony came a little bit in the 70s.
Oh, okay.
So before Tony's name actually came up, Alec Tufadic was actually the big scorer.
Right.
Like, he was really deft. If you didn't stay with him and kept an eye on him, he would slowly just meander away from you. By the time you realized it was too late, he got the ball and he put it into the net.
Was he Serbian guy? Too?
Yeah, he was Serbian. Actually, when we after the 1970 Maple Leafs in 71, they decided to make a real good team. So Alexa Babic was the coach, and he went shopping through the city, and then they approached, and then Franz Reiter, Neil Stewart, Lothar Miller, and myself, we ended up playing with Maple Leafs. And 3 of the 4, that was the heart of the midfield.
Yeah.
The 2 inside forwards, and I was the left half. The only other guy that was really good of all-star qualification at the time was Joe Urukawa. So that was the top four midfield players at that time, or they were the all-star caliber.
Really? So you're talking about teams like that. I mean, it seems like they're ruling the roost locally. They're challenging for national championships. Who at that time? Who were the rivalries for? Who were the rivals for you guys?
Okay, in the 50s and 60s, there were some Detroit teams, Carpathia Kickers, for example. In '62, they won the U.S. Amateur Championship.
Right.
You know, and Art Kustner was their goalie, and he was the Canadian national team goalie.
Wow.
At the time. There were Corinthians, Caboto, Teutonia. There were several teams. And similarly, in the 60s, Teutonia B was pretty strong. Their Macedonia was good. You know, Hellenic was coming up, another team. Croatia started their play and so on. But and in the latter years, then Croatia, Teutonia, Croatia, SS Italia, Hellenic, those were primarily the main organizations. Also Serbs,
right?
You know,
right.
So those were primarily the rivalries. But you know what? In the 60s, 70s, you had 6-8 strong teams.
Really?
The league was pretty strong.
So what were the attendances like?
Well, in the 60s, you know, I remember we were charging admission $3.
Really?
And you had 1,500 spectators.
Really?
You may actually.
Yeah. Who was recouping the gate? The profits
home
from the
teams.
Game? The home team.
Home team. It was your home game.
Right.
The home team, and there was a policeman hired.
Wow.
You know, and he would do that. And the way at the Oktoberfest, if the guys came over the fence, that's how they left. The police guy just threw him over.
Just tossed him over.
Oh yeah.
So 1,500 people. So if I'm managing Teutonia Club, and I know I'm going to get a lot of people to see, you know, my All-Star team play, right away, am I renting Windsor Stadium and looking forward to the game?
I think Weigel Park was known. Windsor Stadium for the big teams, like when Rapid Vienna came in 1960. They played in Windsor Stadium,
which is unbelievable.
And the 1967 Eintracht Braunschweig Bundesliga champion, we played them also at Windsor Stadium.
That is
but
incredible.
But soccer mecca, Vigelpas was known as soccer mecca in the city of Windsor. And it was centrally located, so a lot of people didn't have really transportation. So
Sure.
Erie Street, a lot of Italians,
Sure.
they just
walked right over.
walked over.
Is
you know,
that
stuff like
one of the reasons why they put the big green walls up so that you couldn't spectate from outside of the area?
Well, it was a little bit, you couldn't see, you know, and I guess it was an 8-foot fence.
Yeah, it was.
So stop.
Yeah, but my dad used to take my brother and I there on Sunday mornings, maybe because they didn't charge anything for those games, but we'd always go see the Latinos play, right when my brother and I were at the age where we started enjoying going to see the games. And I remember, like, oh boy, I mean, it's the big green fence. It provided such an atmosphere. The acoustics, if there were a lot of fans there, was fantastic. So I wish we could see what that would have been like. How you doing with your beers, by the way? Are you ready to venture a guess?
I think I got him sort of.
Let's see.
Sort of.
Let's see how we're doing. Have you guessed the Austrian beer?
I thought maybe this would be it. I don't drink it that often, and it's got like a little sweet taste or whatever. I think Bitburger. It's got a little bit more. How is the bitterness?
Yeah.
And Löwenbräu, I had that before. I think this is Löwenbräu.
You're right with Löwenbräu, right?
Yeah.
And these are opposite. So the Austrian beer is. Oh wait, hold on. You're right. This is the Austrian. That's how you line them up.
Yeah.
Oh my God! You're 3 for 3. Whoever it was who threw me the YouTube comment, I will gladly confirm with you that Frank is 3 for 3.
We had the beer fridge in the dressing room for 3/4 of a century, so we have become experts, connoisseurs of variety of beers.
So every soccer player I've ever spoken to, they say the same thing. When you say, what do you miss most about the game? Everybody says the locker room. But that Teutonia locker room is legendary.
Why do you think all these players, after the player career, like Steve Szymanski, Gord Caldwell, Tom Deary, all these guys came to play? Number one, when you're joining the squad, everybody knows how to play soccer. Everybody is already up in age,
right?
So we let the ball do the running instead of us. And the beer, actually, afterwards, you get the shower from the outside and shower on the inside. So it's complete.
It is complete. I remember there was a tournament that the Teutonia Club had hosted. There was a team from Kitchener, a team from London, and of course Leamington, and then Windsor. And then I remember Chad White was playing in it.
Oh yeah.
And we went to go see Chad after, and we were just hanging out in the dressing room, and he goes, "This is the best part. This is the best part about
they go
all
like
this."
3-4 cases of beer.
I started coaching with Chad. We started at Vardar Windsor, and it was so funny, Frank, because like clockwork, one of the kids on our team were playing in Michigan, and he fouls a guy, and the referee pulls out a yellow card right away without even hesitation. Chad goes, "Oh, that's half case right there." I'm going,
yeah,
that's Teutonia speaking. That is everything Teutonia coming out your mouth right now.
Oh, the biggest part is when people are drinking beer, everybody's looking at the other guy for spillage. If you spill a beer, it costs you a case, fine a case.
It was criminal.
We never ran out of beer.
So we go back to all the stars that you're playing with. If you could list to me some of the marquee players to watch, like if you and maybe they were a bit later. Like I was thinking of SS Italia. I'm sure they were probably later on in the 70s, but
I can give you, there were some players that played with us, like for example, in the National Soccer League, there was Zoli Y, which is Mike Y's uncle,
Right.
and Tibor, his dad's brother. And he was from Toronto. Bob Kane played with us in '66 in Windsor, and then he moved to BC in '67, came back to Toronto, and we're playing at Stanley Park, and we had a better record in Toronto Stanley Park than we had at Vital Park, our own home field. Field was a little bit bigger,
Right.
and Bob Kane, and there was just a chain link fence,
Right.
and he comes up behind, our bench, and knocks, and I looks, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in BC. And he says, well, he's back if we need another player.
Sure.
And we signed him up right away. So we had Zoli and Bob Kane from there.
Wow.
But then there was Viktor Juroshevich.
Mm-hmm.
He played first division in Yugoslavia, Tuzla. And there were several other guys. We had guys from Germany that played in the Stuttgart organization and so on.
Wow.
So we had a lot of imported and good players.
Sure.
And that was one of the reasons. Like in the Toronto League, we beat Toronto Croatia, Toronto White Eagles, many other teams,
Right. Right.
But I would like to stick maybe just, I think the Maple Leaf, two best teams that I've played with
Mm-hmm.
is the 66-67 Daytonia
Right.
in the National Soccer League.
Right.
A lot of talent there and a lot of success. And the Maple Leaf team in the 71 team,
Mm-hmm.
they went shopping, I'd say there was about maybe 75% of the Ulster team of Windsor,
Is that right? That's
and,
incredible.
And the part is, and it's understandable, and in my opinion, soccer was the strongest, probably I would even consider it in all of Canada.
Wow.
And comparable with BC, because in opinion that we ended up losing the Canadian final in Vancouver, but if it was a dry field, could have been a different story. For example, Anglo, it was 0-0 and they rescheduled the game. Alec Tufadic could not play in that game. Lothar Miller played center forward. We ended up winning 4-1 and he scored 3 goals.
Wow.
Alec Tufadic, when we went for the Ontario Cup, once we left Windsor, we played Sarnia,
Uh-huh.
beat them 9-0. London champion, 10-0. The defending champion was Hamilton. From 4-1, we beat them 4-3, tight game. Then we played home away, St. Philly, the Toronto representative, and we beat them 7-0 in Windsor, 4-2 in Toronto. After that,
incredible.
we flew to St. John's, Newfoundland to play for the Eastern Canadian Championship.
Uh-huh.
And that team was about 250 kilometers out of St. John's from Newfoundland. And we beat them 7-1.
Oh my God.
And there were about 5,000 spectators.
Uh-huh.
At the end of the game, kids running onto the soccer field asking for autographs.
You're kidding.
Unbelievable.
Oh my
And
God.
then the newspaper article wrote up and says that was the best team that has ever visited Newfoundland, and we must be one of the best, if not the best team in all of Canada.
That's fantastic.
And then I wondered, how come soccer was so attended, so big and so on? And because primarily Newfoundland, there's Scottish,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of Scottish people and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And soccer is actually the #1 sport in Newfoundland, not baseball, hockey, or any other
It's soccer.
sport. So, so that was sort of refreshing
That's
and
incredible.
interesting to me.
Wow. So, I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that we had so many superstars, so many great ex-players, ex-European players here. Why did they choose Windsor? Is it because of the manufacturing trade at that time that was hopping, and they knew they wanted to get a piece of that for stability?
I think that was part of it. Also, Windsor in those days was very ethnic. So in other words, you had a Greek community, Croatian community, Serbian community, German community, Macedonian community. So you had all these little villages, I call it.
Sure.
You know, and when people, maybe Toronto itself was a big city,
Right.
and you know, for you to move around and meet people and so on. So maybe it was a little bit easier, maybe.
Wow.
The other part is also being close to maybe the border.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. It just amazes me. Even the talent that Moncaletti talks about when the Windsor Stars were active here, and they brought over the Brazilians, Jair da Costa, who played for Inter Milan, and I don't think what's Windsor?
Actually, since you mentioned Detroit Express, not Windsor Express, right? Or Windsor
Windsor
Stars.
Star, yeah.
Sorry.
Windsor Stars.
Going back in 1968, Detroit Cougars was the first year entry into the North American Soccer League. So we ended up playing them in spring an exhibition game against them in April, and they had Willie Hunter was 30-year-old English international. Roy Chidham was another international player. Lloyd Snowden was a stopper center half, and a few other players. And actually, Gus Muffet was on that roster. Just, you know, they picked up some young players also,
Sure.
like, you know.
Sure.
And so when we ended up actually playing, you know, the other teams, you know, for me, I thought actually, you know, from the local players, from the areas that grew up. So Alec Tufedic, not Alec Tufedic, I'm sorry, Alex Babic. He was the coach of Maple Leafs, and he said in that era, a span of 7-8 years, you know, and from the local players, and what he basically came up and he said, Steve Toth, right fullback. When Steve came up, Steve played actually wing, you know, in 62, 63. Greg Kosidis.
Why does that sound familiar?
Left, he was Greek, played with Hellenic
Okay.
and SS Italia. But
So-
Greg, anyway, he played left fullback,
Okay.
and then Ilario Bontarin, and he was the center half, but he would have also inserted in Ilario's position Joe Abreu.
Joe Ebrel?
Abreu, Eberl. And he played with Estonia. In 70, he played with Croatia, and he played also soccer in Germany.
Really?
Big, 6 foot, strong guy, very solid.
So what formation? Sorry, I always forget to ask.
He was center half.
No, what are you going for? If you were to name your
Okay,
all-star lineup.
now I'm coming. Jovica Urukalo,
Okay.
right wing, right half.
Right half. Okay.
Myself, left half.
I like that.
And then also Babic would have inserted instead of or with Jovica Urukalo, Manfred, and I would have put Manfred maybe in a different position. But anyway, so that's the mentioning, and then the other person would be Neil Stewart, right wing.
Neil Stewart. Okay.
Manfred or Alec or Gus Muffet, right inside.
Gus Moffat.
And Alec Tufedic being more at that era, you know, Tony came a little bit after.
Sure.
But so Alec Tufedic would be the center forward. Lothar Miller, left inside, and Julian Stoya was a 17, 18-year-old kid. But man, he could dribble, he was fast, he would beat you, and all you would have is chasing him just the grass, coming back, flying at you. And he was so skillful that he would either, with our strikers, he would go either on to go, pulled out the center half, pushed the ball to Alec, Alec put it into the empty net. In that league, Alec was the center forward for Maple Leafs, but Lothar Miller was actually the top goal getter of the league with 16 goals.
So how did Mr. Babbage line up the team? Like I know a lot in the 50s and 60s. There was 4-2-4. There was, oh my God, I remember seeing formation a 4-1-5.
I think it was more of the old style, the WM system.
Oh,
Fullback, halfback, center half,
right.
halfback, fullback, and then wing, right wing, inside, center forward, left inside, left wing.
Gotcha.
And actually, you have 4 in midfield. You have a better distribution and coverage of the midfield, and you're playing with 3 strikers,
Right.
and you can play over the wings.
Really?
The style was a little bit different.
Did you find that the center backs had to push up to give support in the midfield? Because it would have seemed like sometimes you'd be outnumbered.
Not really, basically, the way it ended up is eventually if the other team attacks, I was stronger in defensive role, so I would just drop back somewhat.
Right.
And it could end up almost like a 4-4-3-3.
Sure. Okay.
It could end up, it wasn't cut and dry in stone,
Of course.
but that's how we found it.
Interesting. And the Dutch take credit for that, the WM, don't they? They take full credit.
I think that's the old system.
Yeah. I like it. I think it takes balls to play that way. I think it's marvelous. A wise person once told me that whether you say 4-4-2, 4-3-3, 5-3-2, that's only your formation when you're lining up to defend. When you're attacking, it's free flowing.
Like with our old timer team, the latter years I played sweeper. So I had my stopper, right? But in the tournaments where we go, as a sweeper, technically you got nobody to cover you, right?
Sure.
So I moved into the midfield, and all of a sudden I was like the libero.
Sure.
Nobody to pick up, and with Manfred in tournaments, I would go through and give and go, and I would be scoring goals too.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I could dribble and nobody picks you up.
Sure.
And Manfred was the best guy I have ever played with give and go.
Really?
We had a lot of good guys like Pancho,
Okay.
Tony Concalves,
Yeah.
fast. Like when we had the one team, when we played, there was Mike Roberts, Tony Concalves, and Rob Geyer. And we ended up playing for Ontario Cup in Hamilton. And when these guys ran, it was like a track team.
Is that right?
And these guys, which guys bring a track team or something? Because these guys were running like 100 yards in less than 11 seconds.
Is that right? You know what's funny? I watched you guys play one time, and I never laughed so hard in my life. That Mike Roberts, the guy with the mustache, he said the funniest comment I've ever heard while he was playing the game. Tommy Thompson, little Tosh Thompson.
Oh, he's quick.
He was like flying down the wing, and somebody in the other team said, he looked at Mike Roberts, said, "What was that?" And Mike goes, "Listen, it's impossible for somebody that low to the ground to run like that." I couldn't believe how fast he was.
We would run from the club, during practice. So we would go up Edinburgh, across Howard, all the way to Walker Road and back. And Tommy Thompson was the first guy. I was maybe within 7-8 yards. you know,
Really?
and Tom Surfamovsky says, man, you should be running into marathons or something like this. He says, for a guy, you know, that is 10, 15 years older than everybody, you know, and I was able to finish
Yeah.
that
You
high
had
up.
those long strides too. Your strides were
No,
long.
the part is mental toughness and conditioning.
Yeah.
In our days, when we also practiced, and Mr. Bender, the old gentleman, we would run, and Nick Camera was the trainer. We would run 25 rounds around the soccer field, and somebody wanted to stop to grab a drink of water.
Yeah.
Mr. No, keep running. And one of the reasons, truly, when the weather is extremely hot and everything else, nowadays kids, everybody runs for water. In our days, we were accustomed to the heat and so on, and we could just play.
Is that right, eh? Wow. So how often did you guys practice a week?
Twice.
So twice a week.
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay. And you were still ruling the NSL like that? Twice a week?
And playing, and usually we would, every second weekend, we would travel to Toronto and play games.
That's incredible. And you have to think that some of those Toronto teams were practicing maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
Well, whatever. But anyway, we did ours. Went into the basement. Whatever fluids we lost, we replenished them.
Oh my God. I don't know if that is like the quintessential Windsor story or a signal of the quality that Windsor had, that, you know, you're practicing twice a week, having a couple beers, and yet, you know, you're playing an untouchable brand
you're
of
right,
soccer.
couple of beers, first and last.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's great. So, Frank, I mean, we listed these players. I'm going to ask you about your goalie.
The goalie, you know, there is in our area Nick Camera was very good, and what made him really exceptional, he controlled his 18-yard line. His position in play, rarely you've seen him that he had to dive, you know, to make a save.
Sure.
When he called for the ball, you better get out of his way, otherwise, you know, and that happened in Ottawa in a tournament.
Right.
I ended up sitting in the bathtub in cold water during the night to be able to play the next day.
Really?
Whoa, when he calls for the ball, get out of his
Is that
way.
right? He's a big guy.
Yeah.
I still remember him.
The other one, Zoli, was very good. That played in the National Soccer League from Toronto.
Okay.
And Zoli and his brother, they came out during the Hungarian Revolution in 1956
Wow.
out of Hungary
That's
when
incredible.
they had it. And yeah, I was impressed. And the other honorable mentions that could be included in those players, Eddie Milke, he played in the 60s, was a striker, scored his goals, you know, played in the National Soccer League, played in the VfB Stuttgart organization, Tony Tissel, obviously,
Right.
and I think I mentioned Gus Muffet and Manfred. You know, there's about 14 players I would have put in that scenario,
Right.
and you can move them the way you want. But
not a bad
for
squad.
Manfred, I give Manfred a nod over Gus as right inside, because number one, Manfred could hit a rocket from 35 yards out. The ball would just scream under the crossbar. He could, for head balls, corner kicks, head balls, most of us just with the neck, we go there and head the ball.
Right.
He would bend from his back, and when he headed the ball, it was like a shot on goal
Really?
with power. And like I said earlier, Manfred, I seen him score more goals, different ways that you see in professional soccer.
Yeah.
And I seen him score that depth from a corner kick, he would line up in front of the goalie on the far post. I would deliver a low shot to the 6-yard line, maybe 3-4 feet high, and he would run onto that ball at the top of the 6-yard line, and with the outside of his foot, he would deflect that ball into the far corner of the net. There's nobody in goal in that area.
Right.
He scored about 3-4 goals like that.
Is that right?
Oh,
Wow.
Manfred, and the other part is he's tough as nails.
Yeah.
If you hurt him, he'll step off the ball and so on. He'll kill him.
No, I remember hearing stories about him, and every time I saw him, he had a big brace on or knee brace on in his later years. But
if I had to play against him, I never enjoyed it.
that's quite the formidable team. I'm looking forward to putting that team against all the other teams that everybody had chosen. But so, looking at the playing career, you stopped playing. You play with all these great players. You won countless titles. I've never seen so many accolades for a local player before ever. Looking at all the Teutonia programs, the stuff that I had, you were involved in everything, and everyone clearly thought you were the MVP for many, many, many seasons. What got you into saying, all right, I think it's done. I think I'm over. Was it injuries, or did you want to try a new chapter of the game?
No, actually, I was 39, almost 40, and most of our players, we were about the similar age,
Sure.
So, and my wife, she says, why don't you guys just retire and let the younger guys play? So what we did is actually, we just uprooted ourselves and then ended up playing old-timer soccer.
Right.
Because we had our old-timers team already, we just transitioned over into that.
Sure.
And then we ended up playing actually more games than when we were playing in the league. Like we played 2 games a week, one during the week, one on Sunday.
Jeez.
And then we ended up playing in 5-6 tournaments.
That's incredible.
And we went to Akron, those German-American tournament, just like Croatia plays in the North American tournament.
Yeah.
Similarly, we had like Germans. And then we had a circuit of about 8 teams that we played regularly, and and it was great. And we had something like maybe 5-6 MVP players of the league on the team. So, and I'd say we won about 80% or more of our games.
Right.
And there was a stretch in Ottawa. We were 7 years in the final, and we won five of those tournaments.
All as the old timers team.
And then there was one story. We played against a Scottish team, and Jimmy was his name, and he was a center forward, and I was a sweeper. And he says, you're a cocky bastard, but you're going to make one of these days a mistake, and I'm going to burn you. And then at the end of the game, I said, Jimmy, can I have your jersey as a souvenir? And he gave it to me.
Really? That's great. There's did you ever play against a Scottish guy in Windsor named Jimmy Townsend?
No, but I played against Jimmy Hill.
Oh.
He played in 1964 for St. Andrew Scots.
Right.
And, man, foul mouth.
Yeah.
When you talk about Jimmy,
Yeah.
3 guys that you had asked who are the foul mouth or, mouthy or whatever, I would have had Jimmy Hill, the first guy, and then Nando Ghidolini. Wasn't foul mouth, but every time something would, hey, ref! He would yell. And then everybody looks,
Yeah.
what's going on? And then there was a Mario Tiberia, and he was playing for SS Italia. And man, Jair pushed the ball through his legs, and he started chasing him, like really, because he felt that it was disrespected.
Oh, jeez.
And then there was Conrad Schleier was a referee, and I don't know what Conrad made a call. He grabbed the corner flag and was chasing him on Vinyl Park. Seriously.
Oh my God.
Then there was another guy, Rudy, played Hungarian goalie, and I guess Conrad gave a penalty. He said, "What penalty?" He socked him, and Conrad went down just like a rope,
Really?
like a snake rope.
Oh.
Oh.
But when you start reffing, have there ever been? Was there ever a moment with if you take the top 3 loudmouths that you ever reffed? In your later years when you're being the center referee and not the linesman, did you ever feel like stopping the game and just ripping into them for being disrespectful?
You know what? When I started reffing, and they start you on the line.
Yeah.
Actually, I think one of your questions was what got me into reffing.
Yeah.
And Joe Out, he was an executive with Titonia president, and then he was also the president of the Michigan Ontario Soccer League Phase 2,
Sure.
like in the 80s. And then basically he said when Nick Cameron, he stopped playing, he was coaching, and everything else. He was involved giving back to soccer, right?
Right.
And Joel says, "You bunch of shits, you take everything from the game, but you don't return anything back." And we were like, I was like 42. So that's when I just, okay, well, I wasn't going to go into coaching,
Sure.
Although I did run the Titonia organization for a year and so on, and then I started reffing.
Right.
And then they start you out, on the line and so on. And with Mladen, Joe Bernadich,
Sure.
Mike Kolich.
Oh, Mike Kolich.
Yeah, they were grade 1 referees at that time.
Right.
And Mladen eventually also national. And then I was getting the medal of my first division game I got was Serbs and Croatia. And this was should be a tough game. You know what? I think Croatia won 1-0. It was actually a quiet game.
Uh-huh.
And the part is, because as a player, I knew, for example, what the intent was, of the player, so being there. And also I think the players knew me as a player and they respected me. So that was a good thing. But as reffing, I was reffing more from a player's point of view.
Okay.
And after a while, I got a little bit taken. So I said, none of this Mr. Nice guy anymore.
I was gonna say you start off with an open mind.
And then started issuing cards and so on. And obviously, learning, through clinics and all this stuff, you set the tone in the first 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody knows what what you expect from them, and so on. And then, and the other part is consistency, and don't talk to the players.
Why no talking to the players?
Because once you start talking to the players, then the explaining and all this stuff, and all of a sudden you lose control.
Sure. How hard is that? That's got to be the hardest part.
Well, some guys can control it and learn from it, others don't. And in my days, I was on the line, and Joe Baril was in the middle, and it was an under 18 travel, out of town team. And we were reffing at the Rhine Danube in Leamington. And the the assistant coach from Leamington yelled in and so on. And Bobo, Joe Burrell, went to the guy, gave him the riot act. Don't want to hear nothing, not a sound from you. You want to give instructions to your players, do so, but I don't want to hear any other comments.
Yeah.
Quiet, the game resumed. After I heard that, I picked that up. First time, I don't have rabbit ears, you know.
Yeah.
I let it in now. Second time around, ball out of play, jog over there, give it my riot act, back in the middle and continue.
Is that right? Have you ever had to go over and above? Like, when I think of players that I played with about the time when you were reffing, I mean, I played with a lot of foul-mouthed, loud-mouthed idiots that just couldn't keep it together a lot of the time. And they weren't like that off the park, but just something ignited inside of them once the referee blew. And I played with on many teams. Every team had at least 3 or 4. And I just think, did you ever have to look a player in the eye and just tell them, hey, shut the F up? What are you doing? There had to be a couple.
I don't know. You're not supposed to use the F-bomb.
No,
You're supposed
use
to
it.
show respect.
Sure.
But the part is, I'd say 90% of the time, if you show respect to the players are going to be respectful to you too.
Absolutely.
But there are some players that once the whistle goes, you know, they see red, and winning is the only thing.
Sure.
You know, it's not the sportsmanship part and so on. And I guess I've sent players off. I had players, you know, swear at me and so on. I said, thank you very much.
That was it?
You're gone.
Nobody waited for you to park.
No, gone. And then wrote out my incident report and so on. And the player gets suspended.
Is that right?
You know, and so on.
Wow.
And it's not easy, you know, and not all referees have the temperament and have the ability to control a game.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's even difficult to control a game, depending on, you know, the situations. But some players, or referees, I should say, just don't have it within them to, you know, to issue cards.
Right.
And others may issue cards just like being complimentary tickets or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And then you got to use the cards effectively and smartly
Sure.
to control the game.
Interesting. Is that, I mean, when you follow those rules and that kind of mantra when you're reffing, is that how you started to know, hey, I'm becoming a good ref here? I've got my own rules of play.
Well, I think you notice that when you're reffing, you know, the problems you have, you know, how's the game flowing at the end of the game, you know, players coming off, talking to you or shaking your hand, saying good game or whatever. You know, like my very first red card I ever got, and we played SS Italia, and I think Mike something, he was English, and Peter Johnson reffed the game. So being respectful, I didn't say anything during the game, but he warned Mike. He says, one more comment and you're out.
Right.
You know? And he repeated about 5-6 times, you know. So we're walking off the field, right? The game is over.
Right.
So now I'm not really under referee's jurisdiction and so on. I said, Pete, what's the point telling the guy once more and you're out if you're not going to do anything about it? While we're walking up, he gave me a red card for that. And that was my first red card ever.
Yeah. Interesting. Was that your only red card ever?
No, I had another one And there was, in Leamington, a breakout. The guy kicked me out for peace, but he never reported it.
Oh, he just.
Referee never reported. Not going to say which referee it was.
Okay.
But it was my only red card that I ever had.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, I remember going away for this boring corporate retreat, and this was ages ago, and we were supposed to. It was a workshop on clearing your mind, controlling your emotions, and getting the job done. And I don't. I'm not the kind of guy that flies off a handle or anything like that. I think I only got maybe 4 or 5 yellow cards in my career, no reds. But I remember the lady asked me, she was like, "What about you, Rob? What's one of your biggest regrets?" And it's still clear to this day, and it's the most embarrassing moment of my life. I don't know what came over me, Frank, but I was playing in a game for Rose City against Caboto ages ago, and something inside of me just clicked. And I don't know what I said, but it was to Mr. Pavlicic, to Frank Pavlicic Sr. And I think I went upside and down the other, just on a no call. And it was like right near the end of the game. Yeah. And I remember I hung my head in shame for days. He just looked at me, and I think he shook his head. Yeah, like I think he just realized, well, A, this guy's being an idiot. B, it's Rob Mars. He doesn't really maybe say that much, but to this day, and if I ever see him again, I'm gonna apologize for it 20 years later, because it still burns me. It still hangs with me. And I always wonder if anybody's ever come up to you and say, "Hey,
you know what?" After I started working, I was in management, supervisor, then general foreman, plant superintendent, back to general foreman, then tooling supervisor over tool makers and die setters. So I was always in a position where you have to sort of be flexible to adjust to different personalities. And like I said, it doesn't really, I wouldn't jump quickly to conclusion and so on, but I would confront the individual.
Right.
The whole idea is, if you hear something and so on, if you confront and, the individual, at the same time you're sending a message to everybody else on the field that that's not acceptable.
Sure.
Like even sometimes, your first foul, warranted a caution, but you talk to the guy and you say, "Hey, I don't want to see that. Mm-hmm. If it happens again, it's going to be a caution." And that goes for everybody. So by doing that, I try to send a message to everybody. Not necessarily works all the time. But the point is, but then you said you will, and then you have to follow through.
Sure.
If you don't, then it means nothing. Chaos. And you're going to end up in problems.
Interesting. I think that's good confrontation, because you end up disarming them right away, right? And you're disarming the attitude, the kind of confrontational behavior. I think that's important.
The yapping, you want to kill. If you don't stop that, then you almost have like a choir on the soccer field.
The choir effect. That's good. Yeah, because even parents, right? Parents get into it these days. It's no shame whatsoever. Once they think a ref has made a bad call, and these days, all I see are 15-year-old referees, 16-year-old referees volunteering their time, and they're getting dogs abuse.
Yeah. Well, later, as you develop and you get better, then even, teams that are, and they're spectators, you can actually go to the coach and tell him, "I want that guy removed. Yeah. I don't want to hear another word from him, or else."
And that's good.
And then you can, initially when you're young and you're new at the game, you don't know all, and you don't have the confidence to actually use all your
course.
power.
Of course. Who is the best referee you've seen ref a game? Whether that was diffusing conflict, just overall control of the game.
Well, I think the eras that I came up in the 60s, there was a Hungarian guy, and I think he was from Detroit, like Michigan Ontario League.
Right.
Mladin was good. Mike College.
Right.
He was quite strict. You know, he was for the rules. Like he would enforce them religiously. You know.
Sure.
And Angelo, he had his way. It was a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, it was more casual, but he would talk to the guys and then discipline if necessary. Right. And we've been taught, like, you know, rules are there. You can use them to your advantage. Right. But don't go overboard or abuse them.
Yeah.
You know, rules are there. Just sort of apply them. You know, try to communicate first. You know. Yeah. Before you actually discipline.
Interesting. You know, you go on about the stature of being a referee and that respect factor. And yeah, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but if I knew the referee was a good player or they played the game and knew the game, I never touched them verbally once. And if anything, it was another opportunity for me to play better. I remember you did a game against Rose City versus Serbs, and I don't know if this is a common trait with good referees, but I heard Steve Hart do this too one time when he was refereeing a high school game. He was almost commentating under his breath. Like I could hear him and I could hear you say, "Oh, that was a good hit. Oh, that was a nice shot." And you weren't talking to us or the other team, but you were following the game in a flow.
Oh, I would compliment.
Yeah,
I would compliment
you did.
the player. As a player, ex-player.
Yeah.
When somebody pulled off a nice play and so on, and I'm in the vicinity.
Yeah.
Good job. Nice job.
Yeah.
Nice play.
And it gives you a lift as a player. It almost creates this kind of an unseen tethering of respect, where you're like, "Oh, look, this guy knows. He's been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, and you know, there's no point giving him shit for anything. I mean, he sees the game how it is."
One comment I didn't sort of mention, but you mentioned, like, you know, you had the 4 Geyer brothers.
Yeah.
And then they had their kids. So there were actually 9 Geyer boys. And then at the Silver Dome, in front of the Detroit Cougars,
All right.
they played a home game either against maybe New York Cosmos or whatever it is, but Carpathia Kickers or the Warren Kickers, there was a Donauschwaben team, like Schwabians,
Right.
you know, and they're going to play an exhibition game in front of them. So we played. So there was Manfred, Paul Schlosser
Right.
was the goalie, Neil Stewart. I said, picked up about 4 players, and we ended up playing an exhibition game in front of the Cosmos and the Cougars.
Oh, really?
And the Geyer boys against the Detroit Carpathia Kickers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That must have been a
was
trip.
it was fun.
That's fun. Wow, how many people must have been at that game?
I think they would get probably in the 20,000.
Yeah.
And the Cosmos were averaging in those days, and Pele was already in that era.
Right.
They were averaging something like 45,000 people.
That's incredible.
There were Caniglia.
Chinaglia.
Yeah.
Chinaglia, Cruyff, Beckenbauer.
Oh, yeah. And the guys were there.
That's
so that was
incredible.
interesting.
Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah. Great adjective.
The other part is also when we played the exhibition game against the Detroit Cougars, and at halftime we're going to our bench, like, on the south side.
Sure.
And we're walking off, and there was Charlie. Charlie was Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little guy jogging the ball by the sideline, left-footed. And he asked me, do I know who that was? And I said, no idea. And that was Ferenc Puskás.
Come on.
In 1954, Hungary was considered the #1 team in the world.
Right.
And Germany beat them for the World Cup for whatever reason. But Ferenc Puskás, after that, he went to Real Madrid, and they won five European
Cups.
championships.
Yeah.
And Ferenc Puskás was the coach from Vancouver
Really?
entry, and they were going to play an a league game against the Cougars in
Really?
Detroit.
Oh my God! Wow.
So,
Wow.
seen another
That is amazing.
spectacular. And then when we were growing up back home, I was 8 years old, and in 1954, Yugoslavia had a really good national soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a new stadium that they had built, and we as kids went there and watched this team practice. And my idol players were from Croatia, Vardar,
Okay.
and there was Beara. He was a goalie, and that's the one I sort of was trying to
Emulate.
emulate myself
Yeah.
towards, and Vukas. And Vukas was almost like Messi.
Right.
Little guy, left-footed, had a cannon of a shot from 30 meters out. The substitute goalie went to fist the ball, hit the crossbar, came back about 20 meters back and so on. Yeah. You know,
Really?
Oh yeah, and then when we moved to Germany, then I became a Bayern fan.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's how you became.
Bayern.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So you still must be happy from the
Oh yeah. My son got me the
ass
Bayern,
kicking.
Bayern jersey. You already asked maybe
Yeah.
what's my size?
Yeah,
Large.
yeah.
It's probably going to get me Bayern,
Yeah.
5 European championship jerseys.
And you must be happy with Alphonso Davies playing so well too.
Yeah,
My
fantastic.
gosh.
The kid is
He's a
phenomenal.
machine. He's a machine, right?
You know what? I ended up watching 2 years ago when they played in Toronto,
Uh-huh.
the U.S., and they beat U.S. 2-0. And they had this guy from Holland, and he got traded to somebody playing center forward. So, and Davies, there were 2 strikers actually.
Right.
And man, they outplayed the U.S. and they won deservedly 2-0. And then in the return match in Florida, he's playing left fullback,
I know.
and they
I
don't
can
have the strikers.
I know. Jonathan David, right? Was the other?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is fantastic.
Yeah. But anyway, but in that game, on a 20-yard sprint, the other player, U.S. player, was maybe 13 yards away from the ball. Davis 20. Davis beat him to the ball.
Boom.
Oh, unbelievable. The turbo and inside a square meter,
Yeah,
he could out-dribble the guys in a spot.
it's incredible. I listened to an interview. Thomas Muller was talking about Alphonso Davies, and he goes, "I'm just waiting for the time where I can see him in like a 50-yard dash against somebody on a counterattack." He goes, "I just want to sit back and watch him. I don't even want to get involved in a play."
I don't think he can.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be, by the time you catch up to the goal, he's going to be on the 18-yard line.
Actually, he's been, with the new coach, he's been actually playing well.
Yeah,
And the part is, when they record the amount of kilometers that they're,
sure.
actually the guy was the highest
Yeah, I know.
kilometers. He was like over 12 some kilometers
Is that right?
compared to the others 11.
It doesn't surprise me.
He just keeps running.
He's omnipresent. And as an Argentinian fan, seeing every time that guy's played against Argentina, he's everywhere. Him, and I still have nightmares about the German right back that retired. Oh my God, short guy.
Yeah.
What is his name?
Starts with L.
Lam.
Lam.
What a player.
Philip Lam.
Yeah, he was just involved in every single play. And I thought he was fantastic. But anyways, I'm sure we can go on forever. So listen, I've enjoyed this conversation. I know everybody that's listened to this podcast is going to enjoy this. I just want to ask you one last thing before we sign off and say goodbye here. We know the game has changed, and people say and I'm talking about Windsor.
Yeah.
Game's changed for the worse. Too many clubs, not enough dedication with coaches or players, blah, blah, blah. You haven't been involved in a game spanning well over 4 decades now. I feel that you're at authority to really recognize the downfalls, the improvements. Why do you think we'll ever get to the golden age that you were involved in? And if we can't, right now, why?
I think there was a period, maybe from the 70s to 90s, where really the game has actually went backwards. But what I see nowadays, like through reffing, and I enjoy also doing, under 13, under 12, and so on. And now with the OSA instituting, that coaches have to be certified. They have to go through practice, skills, schedules, and so on. What I actually see, young kids being more skillful. Coaches are teaching them the right way, less touches, running off the ball, and so on. So I think the direction is going in the positive area. The level of skill of the coaching trainers and even referees, I think it's improving. Even in our area, we have something like 3-4 young referees that are in their 20s, are recognized, in the through Ontario soccer, and they've been given games to do even in the upper leagues.
Yep, right.
And we have also some girls involved. The one girl has also been elevated, given centers in women's soccer, like in the development, like higher leagues, like or competitive leagues. So I think it's going in the right direction, but it's going to be time consuming. I probably can't see anything maybe for another, maybe up to 2 decades, where things should start to show. But I think the kids are developing or they're becoming more skillful and more understanding of how the game should be played.
Right. Interesting.
It's not like getting the ball and running with the ball. They're letting the ball, move, get the ball a little bit quicker to the front, support. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
so
that's good. So you're ending on a positive note, saying we're kind of in the beginnings of a renaissance.
In an upswing of growth.
Good. I like that. And I'm sure many other coaches that are listening are going to enjoy what you just said. I was always told it's not whether you're on the top of the ladder or the bottom of the ladder. What's important is the direction. So that's good. So, Frank, I want to thank you, my friend. I want to thank you a lot for bringing all this wonderful memorabilia, which, by the way, I'm going to be taking pictures of and uploading to the podcast on the Twitter site so you all can see this wonderful memorabilia that Frank's brought with him, because there's a lot of great history here, a lot of history that you do not know. There's a lot of faces that you're going to put names to. There's going to be a lot of faces here that I know are family members for sure. And I would encourage you all, have a look at it. Have a look at Frank's all-time 11 with the honorable mentions as well. And always give us your feedback. So again, Frank, from the bottom of my heart, for players my age, for players getting ready to start walking soccer, I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
Well, I've been practicing with the over 45.
Oh, that's good. I've been doing that for 20 years.
Sasa Tchaikovsky, when Vancho mentioned to him, "Oh, Frank is right." Isn't it something like in the 70s?
There actually is walking soccer now.
Yeah.
I hope it comes to Windsor. That'd be cool. So thanks again, Frank. I appreciate coming on.
Anyway, thanks for inviting me and sharing some of the past, I guess, glory days, I call it.
It's certainly my pleasure, and I just want to help spread the story out more and more and more. So thank you. I appreciate it. All the best, meine Freund. Tschüss, Servus.
Tschüss, auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.